Turn them back on. Now! I stood my ground, arms crossed over my high-visibility jacket, refusing to budge as the streetlight above us flickered to life. The woman in front of me, perfectly highlighted blonde bob, Lululemon outfit that probably cost more than my weekly salary, and that signature, "I need to speak to your manager" posture, was practically vibrating with rage. "This is Crimson Oaks property," she hissed, jabbing a manicured finger at the city seal on my chest. "The HOA has jurisdiction here, not the city. Those lights are wasting our dues and attracting undesirable elements." I glanced over at the small crowd of middle schoolers huddled at the corner, waiting for their parents, phone flashlights pointed at the ground. "Those undesirable elements are 12-year-olds trying not to trip on the sidewalk," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "And no, Miss Harrison, the HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over city infrastructure that ensures public safety." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing." "Feel free," I replied, continuing to adjust the control panel. "Officer Reynolds is actually the one who contacted me about this situation. I'm sure he'd be happy to explain criminal negligence to you." Her face went from angry pink to a concerning shade of purple. How did I get here? In a standoff with the most notorious HOA president in the county over a bunch of streetlights. Well, that's a story that starts 3 weeks ago, when I was still just a regular guy who thought being a city electrical grid supervisor was the most boring job in the world. Man, was I wrong. My name's Mike Donovan. I've been with the Department of Public Works for almost 9 years, the last 3 as the supervisor for the electrical grid in our mid-sized city in Northern Virginia. Most days, my job involves a lot of spreadsheets, contractor meetings, and the occasional inspection. Nothing exciting, which is exactly how you want your electrical grid. Exciting electrical grids mean blackouts, fires, or worse. That Wednesday started like any other. Me, in my cluttered office, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a sweaty sock, reviewing incident reports from overnight. "Hey, Mike," Darlene, our dispatcher, popped her head in. "Got another call about those streetlights in Crimson Oaks. 3rd one this week." I sighed, setting down my disgusting coffee. "Same section of Maple Avenue?" "Yep. Parent says her kid almost got hit by a car walking home from basketball practice. No lights for 3 blocks. I pulled up the neighborhood grid on my computer. Crimson Oaks was one of those fancy developments with the big houses, perfect lawns, and HOA fees that could pay a small mortgage. The grid showed power flowing normally to that area. "System's not showing any outages. Bulbs could be out, I guess, but all of them at once?" I frowned. "I'll head over there myself." "The mom who called was pretty upset," Darlene added. "Said she's been complaining to their HOA for weeks with no response." "Great," I muttered. Nothing better than getting caught between angry parents and an unresponsive HOA. When I arrived at Crimson Oaks that afternoon, the area looked exactly like you'd expect. Massive houses with perfect landscaping, not a toy or basketball hoop in sight, and signs everywhere reminding residents about rules. No parking on street, no sheds. Basketball hoops must be stored out of sight when not in use. It was like a beautiful, soulless museum of suburban perfection. I parked my city truck near the entrance and started checking the streetlights. Even in daylight, I could see something was off. The light fixtures were all intact, but when I checked the control panels, I discovered something weird. They'd been tampered with. Someone had installed manual override switches that weren't in our system plans. As I was examining one of the panels, a woman approached me, pushing a stroller with a sleeping toddler. "Are you here about the lights?" she asked hopefully. "Yes, ma'am. Mike Donovan, City Electrical. Can you tell me what's been happening?" She looked relieved. "I'm Jen Martinez. We moved here 6 months ago. The lights were fine until about a month ago. Now they go out every day around 6:30 p.m. and don't come back on until morning." She gestured toward the middle school at the edge of the development. The kids who walk home from after-school activities have to use the bike path that runs through here. My nephew twisted his ankle last week when he couldn't see a crack in the sidewalk. The system shows power flowing normally, I explained. But someone's installed override switches. Any idea who would have access to do that? Jen's expression changed. Probably the HOA. They control everything around here. Our president, Patricia Harrison, she's very particular about the neighborhood aesthetic. Does the HOA maintain these lights? I asked, knowing full well they didn't. They act like they do, Jen said with an eye roll. Patricia's house backs up to this path. She's been complaining about the lights shining into her sunroom at the last 3 meetings. Just then, a black Range Rover pulled up beside us, and a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a suburban luxury living magazine emerged. Even before she opened her mouth, I knew exactly who she was. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice friendly but with an edge. "What's going on here?" "Miss Harrison?" I asked. She approached with a practiced smile. "Yes, Patricia Harrison, Crimson Oaks HOA president. Is there a problem with our lights?" Our lights. Interesting choice of words. "I'm Mike Donovan from the city. We've had reports of the streetlights being out in the evenings. I'm just doing an inspection." Her smile didn't waver, but something flashed in her eyes. "Oh, that? Yes, we've implemented a new energy conservation program. The lights dim in the evening hours to reduce our carbon footprint." Beside me, Jen made a small noise of disbelief. "Miss Harrison," I said, keeping my tone professional, "these are city-maintained streetlights. Any modifications need to go through proper channels and meet safety requirements. These manual overrides aren't authorized." Patricia's smile tightened. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Our HOA contracted with Highland Electric for some routine maintenance. Perhaps they made a mistake. I'll look into it." Before I could respond, she turned to Jen. "Jennifer, isn't it time for the Architectural Review Committee to assess your patio extension plans? I believe they expire next week, if not approved." The threat was so thinly veiled, it might as well have been naked. Jen's face paled slightly. "I should get going," Jen mumbled. "The baby needs to eat." As she hurried away, Patricia turned back to me. "I'll handle this situation, Mr. Donovan. No need for the city to waste resources." "Actually, Miss Harrison, the city is very concerned about unauthorized modifications to public safety infrastructure. I'll need the contact information for Highland Electric." "I'll have my assistant email you," she said dismissively. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting." As she drove away, I took photos of the modified panels and made notes. Something didn't add up, and I had a feeling Patricia Harrison knew exactly what was going on. The next morning, I called Highland Electric. The receptionist transferred me to a project manager named Doug. "Crimson Oaks? Yeah, we did some work there about a month ago," Doug confirmed. "Weird job, though." "Weird how?" I asked. "The HOA president, real piece of work that lady, wanted us to install manual overrides on the streetlights. Said they had approval from the city. Had some paperwork that looked official enough. Claimed it was for special events and energy saving." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "You didn't think to confirm with the actual City Department of Public Works?" There was an uncomfortable silence. "Look, man, it was a rush job with a big bonus for quick completion. The paperwork had a city seal on it. My guys just did what was in the work order." "I need copies of that paperwork and your installation records," I said. "And just so we're clear, modifying city infrastructure without proper permits is a serious violation. Highland could lose their contracting license." Doug cleared his throat. "I'll email everything right away. And, for what it's worth, some of my guys weren't comfortable with the job. One of them lives near there, said his kid uses that path." After hanging up, I started piecing things together. Patricia had deliberately circumvented city protocols, used possibly forged documentation, and intimidated residents who complained. All to what? Avoid some light in her sunroom? My next stop was the police department, where I asked for Officer Reynolds, our usual liaison for infrastructure issues. "Hey, Mike," Dave Reynolds greeted me, offering a donut from the box on his desk, which I declined. 9 years of desk work had already expanded my waistline enough. "What brings you to the glamorous world of law enforcement?" I explained the situation at Crimson Oaks. Dave whistled. "So this HOA lady basically created a blackout zone where kids are walking? That's concerning." "It's more than concerning," I said. "It's dangerous and illegal. The question is, whose jurisdiction is this? City infrastructure, HOA property, possible fraud." Dave leaned back in his chair, which protested loudly. "Honestly, it's a mess. We could cite her for tampering with city property, but she'll claim the HOA had authority and tie it up with lawyers. The city could pursue civil action, but that takes forever." "So what, we just let her keep endangered kids?" "Of course not," Dave said, looking offended. "I'm just saying expect resistance. This Patricia Harrison, I've dealt with her type before. They think rules are for other people." "Well, the rules about city streetlights are definitely for her," I said firmly. "I'm going to restore those lights tonight." Dave raised an eyebrow. "Need backup?" "For changing some settings on streetlights, I think I can handle it." Famous last words. I returned to Crimson Oaks around 6 p.m., just as dusk was settling in. Sure enough, as the automatic sensors should have been turning the lights on, the entire 3-block section along the path remained dark. I parked my truck and got to work on the first control panel, reversing Highland's modifications. I was almost finished when I heard the distinct sound of expensive tires on asphalt. The black Range Rover pulled up, and Patricia Harrison emerged, looking significantly less friendly than yesterday. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "My job," I replied simply, continuing to work. "Restoring city infrastructure to proper working order." "I told you we have an arrangement with the city," she said, her voice getting louder. "This is HOA property." I stood up, work complete as the light above us flickered on. "Miss Harrison, no such arrangement exists. These are city lights on a city easement, regardless of whose property they're on. The modifications were unauthorized and created a safety hazard." Her face contorted. "Do you know who I am? My husband is on the city council." "Councilman Richardson is your husband?" I asked, genuinely surprised. I'd met Richardson at department meetings, and he seemed like a reasonable guy. "No, not Richardson. Gregory Harrison, Public Safety Committee." I tried not to smile. "Miss Harrison, your husband isn't on the council. He's on a voluntary advisory committee with no actual authority over city operations." I could practically see steam coming out of her ears. "Those lights are disrupting our community," she practically shouted. "They're destroying our property values. Do you know what streetlights do? They attract teenagers who make noise and leave trash. They keep us awake. They also prevent accidents and deter crime," I countered, moving toward the next control panel. "Like it or not, I'm restoring them all tonight." That's when she stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "I'm calling the police. You're trespassing and damaging private property." And that brings us back to where we started. Me, standing my ground. Patricia threatening me, and a bunch of kids watching from the corner, probably recording the whole thing for TikTok. What Patricia didn't know was that I'd already spoken with my director and the city attorney. We had documentation of the unauthorized modifications, Highland's confession, and multiple safety complaints. The city was 100% within its rights. When Officer Reynolds showed up 10 minutes later, Patricia practically ran to his car. "Dave, thank goodness you're here. This man is trespassing and vandalizing HOA property." Dave gave me a subtle nod before turning to Patricia. "Miss Harrison, I understand your concern. but Mr. Donovan is here on official city business. But the HOA doesn't have authority over city infrastructure, Dave finished for her. In fact, I've been asked to give you this. He handed her an envelope, which she tore open immediately. Her face went through several impressive color changes as she read. This is outrageous! A cease and desist? Threatening criminal charges? I was protecting our neighborhood. From Streetlights? I couldn't help asking. Dave shot me a warning look before addressing Patricia again. Miss Harrison, the city takes public safety very seriously. The modifications to these lights created a hazardous condition. We have reports of injuries and near misses with vehicles. Those reports are exaggerated, she huffed. And what about my rights? That light shines directly into my sunroom. It's destroyed my indoor plants and disrupts my sleep. A new voice joined the conversation. That's funny, considering your bedroom is on the opposite side of the house. We all turned to see a small group of residents who had gathered, led by Jen Martinez. The speaker was an older gentleman with white hair and the confident stance of someone who didn't intimidate easily. Frank, Patricia said, her voice dripping with disdain, this doesn't concern you. Actually, it concerns all of us, Frank replied. Patricia, the HOA board never approved turning off these lights. You told us you were discussing light shields with the city, not plunging the neighborhood into darkness. Murmurs of agreement came from the group. Patricia's composure cracked slightly. I was handling it. The city was being unreasonable. By expecting streetlights to actually light the street? I asked innocently. Dave stepped between us. All right, let's everyone calm down. Mr. Donovan will continue restoring the lights. Miss Harrison, I suggest you comply with the cease and desist. If you have legitimate concerns about light levels, there are proper channels to address them. Patricia looked around, realizing she was outnumbered. With a huff, she stormed back to her Range Rover. The HOA board will hear about this insubordination, she called over her shoulder. We are the board, Frank called back, gesturing to the people around him. Emergency meeting tomorrow at 7. Don't be late. As Patricia drove away, I turned to the residents. I'll need about an hour to restore all the lights. Any other issues I should know about? Frank stepped forward. I'm Frank Mercer, HOA Vice President. I apologize for this situation. Most of us had no idea what Patricia was doing. She's been difficult since being elected president. That's putting it mildly, someone in the crowd muttered. Why was she so obsessed with these lights? I asked. Jen spoke up. Her house is right there. She pointed to a large colonial-style home backing up to the path. But it's not really about the light. The basketball courts and playground at the middle school were built last year. Since then, more kids cut through the neighborhood. Patricia thinks it lowers property values to have public school students walking past her house. I stared at her, processing the pettiness. So she endangered children because she doesn't want them walking near her property? Pretty much, Frank confirmed. She's been trying to get the HOA to build a fence, but we voted it down. This must have been her backup plan. For the next hour, I worked on the remaining lights while several residents stayed to chat, offering coffee and surprisingly detailed accounts of Patricia's other HOA transgressions. By the time I finished, the entire path was properly lit again, and I had enough neighborhood gossip to last a lifetime. 3 weeks later, I returned to Crimson Oaks for a follow-up inspection. The lights were working perfectly, and I noticed something new. Small gardens had been planted around each light pole, with benches at regular intervals along the path. As I was checking the last control panel, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Donovan!" I turned to see Jen Martinez approaching, this time with her toddler walking beside her. "Please, call me Mike," I said, closing the panel. "Everything looks good here." "Thanks to you," she smiled. "There's been some changes since you were last here." I noticed the gardens. Very nice. Patricia resigned as HOA president, Jen said with undisguised satisfaction. After the emergency meeting, the board voted to remove her. Frank's the interim president now. How'd she take it? Jen grinned. About as well as you'd expect. She's put her house on the market. I laughed. And the lights? Not a single problem. Actually, the HOA voted to add some additional safety features. She gestured to an emergency call box I hadn't noticed before. And we're working with the school to create an official Safe Path program. That's excellent, I said, genuinely impressed. Most of my work involves fixing things that break. It's nice to see something positive come out of it. The kids made you something, Jen said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a handmade card. The middle school safety patrol wanted to say thanks. The card was covered in signatures and drawings of streetlights with smiley faces. Inside was a simple message. Thanks for keeping our path bright. It was probably the first time in my 9 years at Public Works that anyone had thanked me for doing my job. There's something else, Jen said, suddenly looking a bit nervous. The HOA is hosting a neighborhood cookout this weekend to celebrate the new path improvements. We were hoping you might come. Dave from the police department already said yes. I looked at her, noticing for the first time that she wasn't wearing a wedding ring, and that she was actually quite pretty when she wasn't worried about her nephew breaking an ankle in the dark. I'd like that, I said. I've spent my whole career maintaining the grid without really thinking about the people who depend on it. It would be nice to actually meet some of them. Great, she smiled, looking relieved. Saturday at 2, by the big playground. As I drove away from Crimson Oaks that day, I realized something had changed. For years, I'd seen my job as managing infrastructure, not serving people. It took a power-hungry HOA president and some kids with flashlights to make me see the connection between those power lines and the lives they affected. And maybe, just maybe, one of those connections would lead somewhere unexpected. I had a cookout to attend on Saturday, after all. I still had Patricia Harrison's cease and desist letter in my truck. I thought about framing it for my office, a reminder that sometimes even the most boring job in the world can suddenly put you on the front lines of what's right. Who knew being a city electrical grid supervisor could actually make a difference?